Halifax. It's Friday afternoon at the time of recording, which means there's just a handful of days left now until Royal Ascot 2019. And as we always do in the countdown to these big festivals, we're going to do a preview / question answer session where we run through all the big races and then answer some of your questions at the end. If you want to get involved and ask a question, just comment underneath the video. You should see a comment box. Simple as that. I'll see it, pop up on my laptop, and I'll pose it to one of our two experts. And normally we have one. We're treated tonight because we have two Timeform experts in the form of Matt Gardner and Rory King. Evening, gents. How are we?
Hi, Nick.
Yeah,
Thank you. Good. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think a good question to start with is which race are you most looking forward to at Royal Ascot this year?
For me, be one of the middle distance races, probably the Prince of Wales is. I do like all the 3-year-old stuff as well, and to be honest, I quite like watching the 2-year-old. I don't get that much chance to follow them through the season, so actually watching them all come together at Royal Ascot is, I quite like that.
I think I will probably go with the King Stand. It's in many ways a rematch between the first three of last year's race, but I think there are intriguing elements to it this year which give it plenty of interest and far from a 2-horse race, I think, in my book. So very much looking forward to that on the first day.
Bro, so what I think we'll do is, to begin with, run through the major races of the week and then swing back round, look at the handicaps, and then open the floor up to all 8 people that are watching at the moment
How many?
and see how we're going on. Oh, we're up to 10. So we'll kick off with the curtain raiser, the Queen Anne Stakes, the traditional curtain raiser, of course. And it feels a lot like last year, this year's renewal, in that it's wide open and there doesn't seem to be a standout star in the Malin division at the moment in the older horses.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think often the Queen Anne is a sort of a duel between 2 or 3 of the top milers in Europe, or even from outside of Europe, as the case when Tepin came over and won it a few years ago. I mean, you think to those clashes between the likes of Canford Cliffs and Goldacova and Paco Boy and Goldacova, and obviously we had Franco winning it. Whereas last year, like you say, it was a very different kind of race. It was a very open race. I think the first 4 home were all priced at 10 to 1 or bigger. I think 3 of them were 20 to 1 or bigger. So, and I think this year's race is similar in that there are as many as 10 or even 12 who you can give a real chance to. And I think that makes it of interest from a betting point of view, because those at the front of the market don't have all that much in hand. We don't know if Magical's going to run yet. We suspect she's probably going to run the Prince of Wales.
Yeah, I think
she's still in this at the moment, and she would be top rated if she was running this. But of those who are likely to run, the principals from the Lockinge, I think it's easy to make a case for a few of them from that form coming out on top this time round. The Statuary obviously won the Lockinge with quite a big career best. So we don't know if that was a one-off, if that was the start of a very good year. He is a typical late blooming Sir Michael Stout horse, of course. But I think there are a few of those further down the list that you can certainly make sound cases for at the prices. And one for me at a massive price, I'll just mention, obviously she's not one of the likely winners, but One Master, who is a filly trained by William Haggis, who actually won a Group 1 last year. She won the Foray on Arc Day, but she was probably just about the most unheralded Group 1 winner of last year. But she did come from a very tricky draw and position when she won that day, and she did back up that performance when a close 5th in the Breeders' Cup Mile, when perhaps things didn't go absolutely ideally for her. And she's come out this year and she carried a penalty in a race at the Curragh, won by her stablemate Beshayer. And I thought she showed pretty well, actually. She was only 3rd in the end, I think, but she made a nice move from off the pace. She was sort of, Frankie had already rode the winner, and he sort of got her into a lovely rhythm out in front and effectively controlled the race. And One Master sort of made promising move from off the pace before getting a little bit tired, and she had a penalty, and I suspect she'll come on plenty for that. And she's still lightly raced, and she won a listed race on just her third ever start on her only previous visit to Ascot, which I think bodes pretty positively. So in a wide open race, I think I'm making a case for her at sort of 25-1 or so. But I think it is that sort of race where you can definitely be having a go at something and not be not be barking up the wrong tree completely.
No, I definitely think so. I think looking for one at a price is potentially the way to go, because you look at these Group 1s, and really what you're looking for is the sort of level it takes to win one. You know, your 5-year standards and all that sort of stuff. Generally, you're looking sort of mid to slightly higher 120s for like an average Group 1. And a lot of the horses in here just aren't that good. You know, you've got Mustachio, his master rating 127. Libravida obviously isn't far off from either 124, I think. So behind them, you know, a lot of them accidental agent, low glitters, beat the bank. They're not these sort of real top level Group 1 horses. So having to play at one at a price that might have a bit to find on the face of it, but all it takes is 2, 3, 4 of them to run below form, perfectly achievable really in this sort of race. I think the one of those at the top of the market for me would be Libravida. I thought, to be honest, I thought he got given a bit of a poor ride at Newbury. I know he met trouble, but I just thought he was way too far out of his ground. The price has kind of gone on him a bit, hasn't it? You know, he's sort of 4-1 now.
A lot, hasn't it?
He was sort of 14s not that long ago.
Yeah.
And I think 12-14-1 was really the time to get on him. 4-1, there's nothing in that now for me. But I'd almost make him the most likely winner of the ones with the form in the buck, but I can totally see why you'd be looking at one.
Yeah, he is just that sort of horse that you know has probably been aimed at this ever since he joined that yard, isn't he? And he's had those 2 stepping stones towards this, and yeah.
I mean, saying that the horses that, you know, you're looking for the ones that almost are going to underperform, I think Lauren's is probably the one that's most likely to perform, in the sense that she's really tough, she's genuine, she nearly always gives a run in. She was a bit flat in the QE2 last year, but that came at the end of a long and hard season. So, you know, obviously coming here after just one run this time around, she's almost certain to be bang there, isn't she? Really likeable. Of the rest, you know, you're really scraping the barrel a bit, aren't you, I think? To be honest, I think Matterhorn's going to run in this, but he just doesn't look the same horse on turf as he does on all weather. And other than that, like I say, don't really fancy
I think you could give a chance to Lord Glitters as well. He hasn't. Well, he was disappointing in the lock-in. There's no two ways about that. But he does have loads of form at Ascot. He was only narrowly beaten in this race last year, and were the ground to be on the easy side. We're still a bit unsure. We should mention we don't quite know what the ground is going to be like, do we? Obviously, the whole country has had loads of rain this week, but it does drain very well, and doesn't seem like there's a whole load more rain forecast before next week. So it might dry out. It might well be good ground by Tuesday and better later in the week. But if the ground were to be on the easy side, I think he would definitely have to come into calculations in some shape or form.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, definitely, yeah.
Now, one we haven't quite touched on yet that I would like to is Accidental Agent, because he was the horse last year that won at a big price, 33-1. And do you get the feeling that it was just a particularly poor renewal, or is he coming back to the boil now after his most recent start? Could you give him a chance at 12?
I think you could. I think straight course form at Ascot is very much worth keeping in mind whenever you encounter that scenario, aren't you? So, given that he did win the race last year, yeah, he certainly has to be considered, and he did run much better in the lock-ins than he did the year before, than he did last year. It has to be said. He was, you know, in many ways that was a perfectly encouraging reappearance, wasn't it?
It was. I just get the feeling that figure that Accidental Agent posted in this race last year is about his max figure, and
it's probably going to take higher than that to win the race.
I think this. It's not a deep renewal, but I think it probably is a bit stronger than last year, slightly. And I don't think that low, it was 1-2-2 last year. I don't think that's going to be quite enough this time around. But, you know, like Rory says, straight mile Ascot form is definitely to be respected, yeah.
Okay, so that's press you both for like a tentative selection at the moment in the Queen Anne. Where would you both go?
I'd go with Libravida. I've actually backed him at a slightly bigger price than he is now. I wouldn't back him at 4-1 to be honest, but I'd go with him as the most likely winner.
Yeah, I agree. Libravida was probably just about the most likely winner. But as I say, one master for me at a big price would be the way I play the race.
Okay, we'll very quickly touch on the Coventry Stakes, one of the first big 2-year-old races of the season, this, and I think it looks wide open in the betting. I think from a Timeform perspective, certainly looking at the ratings early, the one that's at the top of the moment is the Mark Johnson trained Visionari, and he was a real taking winner last time on debut.
Yeah, he was really impressive, wasn't he? I suppose the key is whether he's going to run. I don't know if they've committed one way or the other yet. Obviously, it is a very quick turnaround, but it's easy to forget that Calix did the same thing last year, didn't he? He won the same race, came here.
Yeah.
Everything about that performance, both from just looking at him physically to the time he recorded, was seriously impressive. And if he does that again, he's going to take loads of beating, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those ones where looking at the bare form might not get you that excited. I think the runner-up had been very disappointing on debut and was in treat pieces for a second start on Saturday, and obviously he took a big step forward, and he was fancied, or he was very strongly fancied on debut. So, but and the two of them were clear of the rest, of course, weren't they, on Saturday? But it's just the time is the most eye-catching thing about it. It was a really fast time. I guess in a way that is a slight concern if he were to run so quickly after posting such a big effort on the clock. And obviously it's a Coventry. It's one of the premier 2-year-old races in the first half of the season. There are lots of horses in there. Arizona is certainly an interesting horse. I think he's run twice at the Curragh. The first time he gave away experience to the horse of Paddy Toomey's Sunday Sovereign, and it was also bad ground that day. And I think the benefit of the run that the other horse had was very important. But he shaped really well, and he came out and he confirmed all of that promise when running away with a race on Irish 1000 Guineas Day back at the Curragh on faster ground. Now it's possible that he did beat a load of backward horses. I think he had 2 stablemates directly behind him, and who both looked like they were in need of the experience and probably longer term prospects. But the way that he opened up in the last following and a half or so suggests that there is a serious engine in there, and he's definitely in the right hands to be, I think, a viable favourite for Coventry. Just touch on the sire, actually. It's an interesting point. He's by No Nay Never, who's obviously only in his second crop of progeny, and it's going to be a big week for him because he's obviously got 10 Sovereigns, favourite for the Commonwealth Cup and favourite for the Coventry Stakes at the time of recording as well. So it's going to be a big week for No Nay Never, who's only, as I say, only in second season of having runners, potentially a regular a week, and that would be a very positive for Ballydor, given that he's No Nay Never is by Scat Daddy, isn't he? So that would be a very good replacement for Scat Daddy.
Yeah, I totally agree that Arizona is, if you Visionari aside, he's the most arguably the most interesting horse in the race, and it's no stretch to see him being the best horse long term. Like you said, I think he probably did beat some inexperienced horses. He was really impressive, and I don't know if there's just maybe 1 or 2 in here that are almost going to be a bit more ready, a bit more toughened, a bit more battle hard. Not battle hard necessarily in the sense that they won't be that experienced, but a bit more sort of clued up earlier in their careers, and potentially can just take advantage of them a little bit. I think one like Ventura Rebel, I thought he just looked really professional at Ascot. I think the 6 furlongs a step up is really going to suit him.
He's kind of been forgotten a bit about it.
He has a little bit,
that was like 7 weeks ago.
It was a while ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think that's part of the reason that every time these impressive horses come out, they sort of jump up towards the front of the market, and the ones who posted to form a little further back tend to sort of get shuffled down the pecking order, don't they? But
the form that he achieved, it's not far at all behind the likes of Arizona and Visionari. And like I say, that professionalism, I think, is potentially going to stand him in really good stead in this sort of race.
Yeah, and it's course form, of course, which is always positive.
Yeah.
Okay, will be fascinating either way it goes. We'll move on now to the King's Stand, and seemingly this centres around last year's 1-2, Blue Point and Batash. We know how talented Batash is. We know how quirky Batash is. If he gets it right, can anything live with him?
I think that's the key, isn't it? I think it's which Batash turns up. Is it the horse that can run to mid 130s that we've seen at Haydock, we've seen at Goodwood? Is it the sort of slightly underwhelming Batash that sort of fails to deliver off the bridle a little bit, like he did at York? Like he was disappointed in France as well, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was super impressive at Haydock in his reappearance. If he turns up in that sort of form, then he's the best horse in this race. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But there is just that question about, he's not bomb-proof, is he, by any means?
No.
Whereas Blue Point, he is the sort of horse that any slip from Batash, he's going to be bound there to take advantage, isn't he? And I think as well, he's almost coming off a better prep this year.
Yeah.
I know he's been missing for 3 months since Maidan, but you think back to last year, he disappointed a bit in Maidan, and then he had trouble getting over to Hong Kong, I think it was, and he
a poor run in Hong Kong.
Yeah, ran poorly there, and then came back, and he's got a really good record fresh. So if Batash doesn't fire, even if he doesn't fire a bit, Blue Point is very, very talented, and he's going to be able to take advantage.
Yeah. I certainly do agree with that. Batash is a superb sprinter on his day, and he has had his day a couple of times, well, more than a couple of times, 2 or 3, arguably 4 times over the last 2 seasons, hasn't he? But
he's posted 130 figures 3 times, I think it is, something like that.
Which is a really high barrier for a sprint like this.
Yeah.
And he did look as good as ever on his return, but I do think that race went perfectly for him. Like so, Haydock is probably a track which, if you could design the ideal situation, it would be at Haydock. He kind of settled well, didn't he? He was able to get a bit of cover early on, which was important. I think in this race last year, he didn't manage that. He sort of almost started too well and found himself in front, and was then arguably a bit too keen, wasn't he? And I think everything did go perfectly for him at Haydock. I think the international challenge in this race may well suit him, because you have the likes of Hootson, the Australian mare, who does seem very quick, and there's a good chance that she finds herself at the head of affairs straight away, which, if Batash can it may be that it comes down to the draw being very important, and if he's drawn close to the speed, that's going to be a big positive for him. If he's maybe drawn a little bit away, there's a chance that he's fresh early and he doesn't show his best. As I alluded to earlier, I like Mabs Cross in the race. I think that she wasn't far behind them at all last year. There was certainly an element of her picking up the pieces in last year's race with Batash having done too much in front. But she was only just failed to catch him for second last year. And she's improved since that. She's improved since then. She went on to just get touched off in the Nunthorpe when she had both Batash and Blue Point behind her. She then won the Abbey, and she came up this year and stepped forward again when winning the Palace House at Newmarket under a big penalty, under a £7 penalty. That was really some achievement. And she was behind Batash at Haydock, but in contrast to Batash, I think that was completely not ideal for Mabs Cross. She's not a horse who relishes an out-and-out speed test over 5. She is more of a grinder who's going to be dragged into the race at a stiffer track, with a stronger pace, with horses taking trouble up front. I think that she's definitely going to come into the race again, and given that she was right on their tails last year, and she has beaten both of them at York, I think she has to be considered and is arguably a very strong each way bet.
Yeah, potentially conditions as well. Going back, she's won on soft ground. So obviously, now like you said earlier, we don't quite know what it's going to be. But if it does turn into a little bit of a slog, it's going to play to her strengths more than the others, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
And I'm right in thinking as well that she bizarrely had to concede weight at Haydock, I think, to Batash.
She did. She had that quick one penalty from the Abbey, whereas his penalties had all expired.
Yeah.
So she's on better terms here. I think she's a player in the race.
Yeah.
I think from an each way point of view, especially, she is interesting.
So Matt, you would be with Blue Point. With Alan's commented he's big on Blue Point as well.
Yeah.
You'd be in his camp over Batash.
I would, I think, from a just in terms of having a bet in the race, I'd struggle to back Batash. You know, he is an outstanding sprinter. You know, like you said earlier, recording several figures in the mid 130s is it's rare. You know, you don't they're not ten a penny. You know, Blue Point doesn't have that in his locker, but what he does have is a string of really high quality performances. And if Batash does slip up, I think Blue Point, and like you say, Mabs Cross as well, I think they're the two that are going to be able to capitalise if Batash sort of doesn't fire for whatever reason, and there are potentially several as to why he might not.
And you beat each way on the.
I'll be each way Mabs Cross. Yeah, I totally accept the chance that she's just not as good as him, and if they both run their race, then we're probably playing for third at best. But I don't think that's necessarily a given, and as we said, it's not far from certain that Batash is going to give his running, and she does have the verdict over them before, so I think she's a sort of sound each way bet.
Okay, the last race we're going to touch on for the time being on the Tuesday is the St James Palace. Pretty interesting news coming into this that Magna Grecia is not going to take his chance. Subbing in for him is Circus Maximus from the Endless supply that Aidan O'Brien seems to have, and as such it seems to focus on three now. The Irish 2000 Guineas winner Phoenix in Spain, 2 down hot, and then this complete flying ointment in King of Comedy.
Yeah, probably. I think you're probably right to discount Scardu from the reckoning. I mean, it's a bit harsh to say for a horse that's been kind of in the frame in 2 Guineas, but he has been beaten about 4 lengths in both at Newmarket and at the Curragh, so he is going to have to find a jolt of improvement if he's going to win.
I thought he had every chance at the Curragh as well, to be honest. I think that was sort of fair and square, wasn't it, really?
Yeah. And it's almost interesting in a way to think that coming into a race which 3 weeks ago Phoenix of Spain beat 2 down hot with 3 lengths, you're thinking he must be a very strong favourite, really. And yet I'm not fully convinced that it's as cut and dried as that. I mean, for a start, 2 down hot beat Phoenix of Spain in the Champagne Stakes last year. Not quite as far, but similarly readily. And he obviously had the well-documented issues early this season, and it was far from an ideal prep running in the Irish Guineas 9 days after the Dante, wasn't it? I mean, I think there are definite cases to be made that he is now ready to post the sort of performance that his 2-year-old form suggested he could. I mean, as I say, he beat Phoenix of Spain in the Champagne Stakes. He beat the Derby winner into 3rd in the Dewhurst. It's hardly like his form has worked out poorly. And if he's now had those 2 runs under his belt, if he's now ready to run to his best, then I think in a way he's the most interesting horse in the race.
Yeah, I think I'd go with that, to be honest. I know it's almost easy to write these horses off where they enter their 3-year-old campaigns with more hype about them than anything else, but I think the thing was with 2 down hot is that there was a lot of substance to his 2-year-old form as well. You know, I almost feel like the Dante was sort of the wrong thing to do first time back. You get the feeling they were trying to make him into something that he just wasn't. I think they'd have been better sticking to a mile and then potentially going out to a mile and a quarter later in the year. I don't see any reason why he's not going to be as effective at a mile and a quarter in time. You know, the Curragh run, I thought in the circumstances was really good. You know, coming back, like you say, 9 days after a less than ideal prep at York, you know, for him not to completely bounce out of that, I thought was a positive sign. So obviously, you know, coming here a bit more sort of regulation. It's almost like he's starting the season proper now. You know, he's going to go Royal Ascot. You'd think maybe after that they might up him to 10 furlongs depending on
it could be
what they do. So
goes, isn't it?
So I think, you know, 2 down hot, harking back to that 2-year-old form, it's really strong. I'd almost start afresh and kind of go, you know, let's see the real 2 down hot now.
It's interesting to read about Gosden's regret about 2 down hot in the post today. He was talking about it yesterday. It isn't the only one he's got. He's also got King of Comedy. He was impressive last time, I think, in the listed contest. In terms of the form, how much does he have to find to be competitive with the 2 main protagonists?
on Tudor on horse best form and on Phoenix of Spain's racing from the Curragh, he does have a jump to find. He does have another half a stone to find, at least probably.
Yeah.
But he is very much on an upward path, isn't he? And he is. The fact that Gosden seems to be happy to let him run in here against the stablemate probably is a positive sign, I think, rather than necessarily a negative about both of them.
Yeah, I'd say so. I will say so. I do think King Comedy's got a big engine. I really do. I think if he temperamentally can be kept on the straight and narrow, then we're probably going to see quite a lot from the horse. I just wonder whether the occasion, horses that have Group 1 form, it's going to be a bit more hustle and bustle. It's going to be a bit more sort of tightly fought. Whether that's really going to suit him. Yeah,
just to expand that a bit further, he gave trouble going to the start at Sandown, I think, didn't he? He had to be led a lot of the way to the start, and then he does show signs of quirkiness in his race.
He throws his head up in the air a little bit, doesn't he? Yeah. And I mean, we're talking about an inexperienced horse at the end of the day, but I do think there might be a little bit of temperament in there. Whether the occasion sort of brings that out, or whether it stimulates him and gets him to put his best foot forward, I think that's the sort of thing that's really exciting with King of Comedy, and we'll find out, won't we? Yeah. That's going to be the key.
Okay, so...
And sorry, I should just say that Gosden took the same path last year without parole, winning that Sandown race, coming on to beating, in many ways, some more heralded rivals in this, so he does have the history of doing that.
Okay, we'll move on now to the Wednesday, because we're halfway through the preview and we're one day down. And very quickly, Rory, you have a fancy in the Queen Mary, I believe.
Well, Queen Mary is obviously revolves to a large extent around the Wesley Ward horses, and it's hard to know, as ever, quite how good they are, how fast they are. Well, generally they're very fast, and they've won their debuts by a long way in most of the cases. He has a horse in the Queen Mary called Kimari, who won by an especially long way on her debut. I think she won by 15 lengths in a very fast time at Keeneland, I think, beating a horse who has since come out and won a similar race, I think, quite recently. So she's obviously entitled to a lot of respect, but just the one I think is worth mentioning is Good Vibes, who won the Marygate at York, which was the same race that Signora Cabello won en route to taking the Queen Mary last year. And I think there's a chance that because of who she's trained by, Dave Evans, and because she's already had 3 runs, she may be underestimated a little bit, but I think that would be wrong. I really liked her run in the Marygate. I thought that they did go strong pace, and she was in the second half of the field, which you could argue the way the race was run did suit her, but I actually think that she wasn't necessarily there by design. I think she was kind of stuck behind horses for a long way, and as soon as she got the gap at York, she shot through it and she mowed the leaders down impressively. I think an even stiffer 5 is going to suit her even better. I mean, we're highly likely to get a strong pace in here. If there is still any ease in the ground, I think that's going to suit her too. I think a dam was and just touched off in a super sprint at Newbury on heavy ground. So I think there's a lot in Good Vibes' favour, and at the current prices, I think she's an interesting bet.
Okay, it's a good point you made that the Wes Ward runner is always a bit of a danger of being overbet in these 2-year-old races. Was that the race that Lady Aurelia won a couple of years ago, the Queen Mary?
She did win the Queen Mary, yeah. It's an interesting point, actually. I'll just raise it now because I think he's going to have at least one runner in the Albany later in the week as well, which is over 6 furlongs. But actually, all of his 2-year-old winners at Ascot have come over 5 furlongs. I think I'm right in saying it's more sort of the fact that they can use their speed all the better over 5 than they can 6. So we may have time to touch on the Albany later on, but yeah, certainly the Queen Mary is the race I think that he targets most of all.
Okay, Wednesday's feature is the Prince of Wales Stakes. Sadly, there's no Enable here. It seemingly come a bit too quick for her. Instead, the race, seemingly in the betting at least, centres around two fillies that suffered defeats here last year in Magical and Sea of Class.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting race. For a top level race, I think quite a few of them potentially have just a little bit. There's a few questions about some of them. I think Sea of Class, a lot depends on the ground. They were worried going into the Arc last year about if it came up soft, whether that would suit. Obviously, we don't know at this point what it's going to be next week, but if it is soft ground, I won't be surprised if they don't run it, to be honest, and savour a little bit. Magical, I'm far from convinced about her, to be honest. You know, you look at her two big figures, the Breeders' Cup, and then in a small field in Ireland last time. I don't know whether she's quite that good. I think she might just have a little bit to find with some of them. Crystal Ocean dropping back in trip to try and get that Group 1 win. Again, if it's soft ground, he's got form on soft ground. If it turns into a bit of a slog, you know, that might suit him. He's the sort of horse that does sort of forges clear rather than quickens in his races, so that could play to his strengths. Massar coming back from a big break.
Would you think Crystal Ocean would have the speed on good ground?
And do you think he'll run here as well, because he's entered in Hardwicke?
They are going to run him here.
That's right.
Yeah, they're going to try and fight. They're going to try and get that Group 1 win, I think.
Okay.
I don't know. I think Sea of Class on good ground. I think Sea of Class would be too quick for him. I think she's got that sharp turn of foot. Crystal Ocean, he just doesn't seem to have that, does he? He's one of those horses. He doesn't quicken. He kind of grinds it out a little bit.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So, you know, I think for me, the one that I'm not necessarily most interested in terms of their profile, but in terms of potential winning is the French horse, the Volgeist. You think back to the Arc last year, not quite as much as Sea of Class, but he did really well to come from the back. And he's just a consistent high 120s horse that is versatile with regards to conditions and trip. Lots of his form actually looks pretty strong. You know, it all reads quite well. And just with, you know, a few doubts over 3 or 4 of the top horses, I think he could be the one. You know, 11 to 2, 6 to 1 at the moment. That I think that almost overlooks how strong his form is. Obviously that might change depending on the makeup of the race if Sea of Class doesn't run, for example. But I think he's got plenty to go for him. Yeah.
By yourself, Rory, which one's standing out for you?
None of them, to be honest with you. It's actually one of those races where I'm not going to be having a bet in the race. I'm just going to enjoy the race for what it is, which is potentially a top-class Group 1 featuring a clash between 3 or 4 very, very good horses.
Yes, I think Sea of Class is potentially really good. I think she might even have more to come this year. You know, she's definitely one to look forward to, but I think the ground's going to be the key for her, isn't it?
Okay, up next is the Duke of Cambridge, and time is beating us here, so I'm just going to offer you a dart each to throw at that because it looks a wide open renewal, this.
It does. It's not a race that I've gone through in a whole load of depth, I'm going to have to admit. But Agritera looks like she's been named at the race, isn't it? She won the Seddon over the same course and distance last year. She won at Kempton on every appearance and seems to have been saved for this, and I suspect she's a filly who's still got a bit more to offer.
I think she's a Group 2 filly, and she was top of my list in this, to be honest, as well, so I think we can deal with that one pretty quickly.
Excellent. 8 to 1 at the moment, Agritera. Now, I think it's probably the best time to touch on this now because you said you were hot on one in the Royal Cup. I know we were going to wait till the end for handicaps, but it seems to tie in nicely. And you've said that one is your better than the meeting.
Well, I think the one of the best handicap bets of the meeting is going to be New Graduate in the Hunt Cup. Sounds almost daft coming from a Ripon handicap to that. You know, he's tight in the bet. He's been well found. He's almost been a talking horse for the last couple of weeks, hasn't he, about it? But everything about his Ripon form has worked out. You know, there's 4, 5, 6 winners come out from in behind, isn't there? Really impressive. I think the straight mile, big field, strong pace is going to suit him even more. And I think, you know, he's one of those horses that before the end of the year is going to be a Group 3, maybe even a Group 2 horse.
Yeah, he's really like the race, isn't he?
Yeah.
He obviously went up a chunk in the weights for winning that race, but I think if the handicapper could have his go again now, he'd be going up another chunk, wouldn't he, given how strong that form is?
Yeah, I mean, you look at a mark of 105, you don't often think the horse is thrown off that, but I think he probably is. And yeah, for me, one of the best handicap bets of the year.
How do you feel about
of the meeting? Sorry, of the year.
Of the year. How do you feel about? My mind always goes back to Dreamfield. I think it was last year. He was or the year before, he was absolutely piled into for a similar handicap. I think it was on the Saturday.
Yeah, in the Wokingham, yeah.
And the Woking appealed as a type, as a group horse lurking in a handicap. You always have that danger of it being a big field scenario. At what price would you be eking away his fives at the minute?
There's two ways of looking at that, though, isn't there? I think you can look at it and say it's a big field, he's only 5-6 to 1.
Yeah.
Or you can look at it and say he's a horse that's probably, come the end of the year, going to be £10-12 better than the rest of them, and he's 6 to 1. So, you know, I personally, for this horse in particular, I definitely go the latter route and say he's a really good bet.
I'll just throw one in there at a good price if I could. Horse called King's Field, who's trained by Joseph O'Brien, who actually only made his debut last September. He's come a long way in quite a short space of time. He won, I think, 3 races last year. Very impressive when winning a handicap at Dundalk over a mile in December, slicing through the field from off the pace. And interesting, I think Dundalk form can often translate onto a straight course at Ascot. Obviously, it's settled for Bay, who won the Hunt Cup last year, had some strong form at Dundalk. I think that run style is one that's going to be suited by this. He went to Meydan, things didn't go his way in one run in Meydan. They rode him more positively, and I think that backfired. But since then, it looked like they've sort of changed their target and have aimed at this. And he had a pipe opener in a listed race last month when he shaped pretty well. I thought he looked rusty, but he ran on into third. I think they would probably have been quite encouraged by that, and he's coming here still with potential intact, I think, and he's one flying below the radar at the moment, I think, who could well be in the shake-up.
Okay, on to Thursday now. I think, am I right in thinking you want to touch on the Hampton Court Stakes? Or
I think we can probably.
I don't think we need to get more.
No, I think we can probably skip over on that one, yeah.
Instead, we'll go to the Ribblesdale then. And I don't know, is the tale of this race perhaps those that are missing rather than those that are taking part?
I think so, yeah. You know, looking at it now, potentially the top rate is going to be Fleeting if she runs out of the Oaks. Unexposed at middle distances, obviously still. You fancy Queen Power's going to run. She's still open to improvement. She's not.
Certain to stay.
She's not certain to stay. She's shaped like she would, didn't she? But she's not certain to stay. I think Franklina, William Haggis suggested that she would run, and she's got no problem for stamina. She'll stay further still, won't she? It doesn't look a very deep race, to be honest. I don't think it's going to take anything out of the ordinary to win.
No, I don't think
it.
it's a vintage renewal, is it?
No, and to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if something like even Shambolic or one of those horses that's battle hardened, got the form in the book.
Yeah. It could come down to tactics on the day, couldn't it? Something may well be able to steal an advantage in front. It doesn't look like it's going to be a particularly big field, does it?
No.
And yeah, I don't have a strong view at the moment. To be honest.
I think Queen Power is probably the most interesting horse in the race. If she stays, she'll probably be the best horse. But the question will be stamina.
Thursday's feature is the Gold Cup, and there's only one horse to centre this around, and that's Stradivarius. He's going for the £1 million bonus for the second year running. There are plenty in here in the race. There is some depth to this race, but can you honestly see him being beaten?
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah. I think for a start, you've got the fact that he had such a hard season last year. That winning that £1 million bonus, I think it's kind of been taken a little bit for granted because he did it in the first year that they offered it. But that's a really hard sequence of races to keep winning. It spans several months. They're all pretty hard races. The Gold Cup in the middle of them is one of the hardest races of all on the flat, isn't it? And yes, he's come out and won first time up this year in the Yorkshire Cup, but often you don't see the effects of a busy season until a horse then goes back again second time. So I think he may still have a little bit to prove. Well, not that he has anything to prove, but there's a chance that last season's busy efforts will catch up with him at some stage.
I think that's probably fair. We had a little bit of a chat about him earlier on, didn't we? And we both agreed that in this sort of race, you've got the likes of Cross Counter and DXB, both of whom are are very interesting horses in their own right, and you sort of feel like you're waiting for them to serve it up to Stradivarius a bit, don't you?
Yeah.
Last year I completely take your points about him having. It's by no means easy the races that he won, but you always got the impression he had a little bit in reserve in winning them.
Yeah.
Potentially not the Gold Cup, because that's a proper test, isn't it? But you think back to the Lonsdale and that sort of thing. He was doing it fairly readily at the time. Cross Counter and DXB, I think, are the horses that could really push him.
Yeah, I think from a ratings point of view, it's a really interesting race because he hasn't yet hit sort of superstardom ratings-wise, has he? Well, it's very hard to do that for a stayer, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
There's a chance that DXB and Cross Counter, I think DXB in particular, could be a horse that drags out an even bigger performance from Stradivarius if Stradivarius is able to do so on the day. I'm kind of in two minds about it myself.
You almost feel like Stradivarius is one of those horses that for him to post that big figure, I think for him to be at his best, he's going to have that horse to chase, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I think DXB fits that mold perfectly.
Yeah.
You know what he's going to do. He's going to go to the front probably. He's probably going to kick on a fair way out and make it a bit of a test. And I do think, it's almost a case of either Stradivarius is going to find the run ending, and that's kind of going to be in it, and we're going to reflect and say it's probably a step too far, or he's going to find those reserves that it does look like he's got, and he's going to run £4 or £5 better than he's ever run.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
There are similarities between the race a few years ago when Big Orange made the running against Order of St George, and Order of St George was the reigning champ and looked like he'd catch him, and he couldn't. And I think there's a certain amount of Big Orange about DXB in that he is just a horse who is probably going to give his all. I think he's a perfect ride for the Sousa. I presume he's going to be handy if not in front, and certainly coming inside the last half mile, he's highly likely to be in front, isn't he? And it's a question of how much improvement he can find for the extra trip, which could well be several pounds worth.
Could be
at
enough.
least. Yeah.
Yeah, it could be enough to beat a Stradivarius that isn't quite on form. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think, and then you've got Cross Counter into the mix as well, who to win the Melbourne Cup as a 3-year-old is a big effort, and he's gone on again from that. That was a pretty smooth win in Dubai, wasn't it? So he certainly can't be left out of calculations at all, and I think it's a really interesting dynamic to the race.
We've got two St Ledger winners in here as well, both Train Bade and O'Brien. Both aren't certain to come here, but is it an extra ask to step up to 2.5 just because they've won the St Ledger doesn't mean potentially that they're going to get this trip?
No, it's another nearly 6 furlongs, isn't it? The Ledger is an extended 14 furlongs, and that's a long way in any sort of horse racing, isn't it?
I do think Kew Gardens is potentially a weapon at 2 miles, but I'd be surprised if they ran him in this. Coming from the Coronation, stepping him up to this sort of trip.
It does seem an unorthodox,
Yeah.
but it's hard to call anything unorthodox that Aidan O'Brien does, isn't it? But if he was the Gold Cup horse, you wonder whether he would have turned up at Epsom. And it kind of seemed like Capri was the Gold Cup horse this year, but he hasn't.
He's not done it, has he?
He's been disappointing, hasn't
Yeah.
he, really? Yeah, I mean, there's always that chance that on the day over the extended trip, it can drag out improvement from seemingly nowhere. But I think it's a really good Gold Cup potentially, and for a horse who hasn't had a great season so far, I think it's a big ask for Capri, and similarly for Kew Gardens, given that preparation. Yeah, it would take a very good performance to win this, I think.
Yeah.
All right, on to Friday then, and we'll start off with the King Edward Stakes. Is it King Edward the 7th? I've not got
It
that.
is, yeah.
I've just written King
Yeah,
Edward, shambles. And this is fascinating because of how skewed a picture we had from the Derby.
Yep.
I mean, we don't know how many of them are going to turn up here, but I mean, the impression I got from the Derby was we could run that 10 times and we could get 10 different combinations in the first 5. That's how close it was.
Yeah.
Would you have that opinion here that any of the 5 could overturn the form?
Well, I think it depends on what's going to turn up. Obviously, at this point, we don't know. I think a more general point is, you're looking often at the Derby to sort of establish that 3-year-old picture, and it kind of hasn't done that. So, depending on what shows up here, and then obviously you've got the Irish Derby as well, for races to really establish that pecking order. It's definitely not out of the way to see Aidan O'Brien throwing in the likes of Japan in this sort of race. He's not obviously had the ideal prep earlier in the year, but it was a really good effort in the Derby, and I think he's the sort that's going to make up into a ledger horse. I think of the ones that are more likely to run, Private Secretary is probably top of the list. He's a horse that, he's definitely on an upward curve. This is a further step up in grade for him, but he was impressive last time. Everything about it looked like he was well worth a try at Group 3, Group 2 level. I think he's got more to come. It's more just a case of which one, if any, from that Derby does run. But I think Private Secretary is definitely an interesting horse.
Yeah, I agree that Private Secretary is probably a horse who's got a further step forward in him. I'm not going to pretend that I've got the winner of this sussed at this stage. It's a minefield at the moment, isn't it? I think Aidan O'Brien's got 20 odd at least horses in it. We don't know who's going to run, and I think we need to be waiting for declarations really. So I'm not going to waffle on any more than I need to.
One race where we do know the picture in is the Commonwealth Cup, and Aidan O'Brien has the favourite here, a commanding favourite in 10 Sovereigns. Now the race is all the poorer without Calix. Is 10 Sovereigns the rightful favourite and the right price at 30 to 8?
He's definitely the right favourite. There's no doubt about that. That middle part win was suggested that he was a top level sprinter in the making.
They tried to make him into something that he's not, didn't they, in the Guineas?
Probably, and he didn't run at all badly.
He didn't at all, no.
In the Guineas, he was probably ridden to win the race from some way out, and then obviously the first two were towards the stand side. And I'm not necessarily certain that he won't stay a mile at some stage, but we know he's very good over 6, and yeah, he is the right favourite, but he's not. He's sort of assumed very strong favouritism in the absence of Calix, hasn't he? I mean, before Calix disappointed at Haydock, Calix was a strong favourite for this, even knowing that 10 Sovereigns was going to be running. Obviously, Calix disappointed and has had a setback. But yeah, I mean, I think 10 Sovereigns definitely deserves to be favourite. He's as I mentioned earlier, it's potentially a big week for No Nay Never, and he looks like a top class sprinter. Yeah, I mean it's hard to say he's a really good bet at whatever it's 13 to 8. He's
about 13 to 8.
Yeah. It's hard to get particularly enthusiastic about backing him, but he very much does set the standard. I mean, he did only beat Jash by half a length in the middle part, but it was kind of a convincing half length, wasn't it? They tried to stretch Jash out in trip. He ran over 7 on his reappearance, and he did win, but he didn't look like it was really what he wanted to do. And I think he's going to be more comfortable coming back to 6. You have to throw Cardem into the mix as well, who's in the same colours as Jash. Trained by Charlie Hills, he won at Newbury on Locking's Day, and he's another one who looks potentially quite a buzzy horse.
I almost feel like, obviously this is going to be the best race by far he'll have run it. I kind of feel like in a way that's going to suit him.
Yeah.
A better gallop, bigger field.
Yeah.
He's very free in his races, isn't he? I feel like this is the sort of setup that might just really suit him.
Yeah.
He might be a little bit quirky, but I can definitely see him running a big one.
Yeah. And he doesn't have he needs to step forward again, but he's far from exposed. But he's won his last 3, I think, isn't he? And he's in good hands for winning this race. All in all, I don't have anything negative about 10 Sovereigns. I just don't find the desire to be lumping on him at that sort of price. I think that he was trained for a mile and he's coming back. I think obviously Aidan O'Brien has history with doing that, but it's still, I think, a little bit of an ask which might not be accommodated in the price.
I agree with that.
Probably different slightly different training and stuff. Well, one I just throw in, well, a couple I'd throw in at a big price. Big Brother's Pride, who's a French filly trained by Francois Rojo. I think she won the Prix Sigui on her last run, and she won it by 4 lengths. I think she's got a proper sprinting pedigree, and she's very lightly raced, and she's on the back of winning a Group 3, I think, by 4 lengths, and seems to have been put away for this since. So I wouldn't leave her out of calculations. And probably an even more left field one is Forever in Dreams. Forever in Dreams is trained by Aidan Fogarty, who's pretty, well, not particularly well-known Irish trainer. She was trained by Mattia Policier last year. She actually ran in the Queen Mary and was only beaten a length and a half or something, I think. But she's won both starts over 6. She looks like a real big, strong filly, and she's got a good sprinting pedigree as well. She's by Dream Ahead, who was obviously a champion sprinter, and her dam is a half sister to Marchand d'Or, I think, who was champion sprinter in France at least once or twice. So she's going to have to improve. I think she's about a stone to find with 10 sovereigns at the moment, but I like the way she won at Haydock, the Cecil Frail Stakes. She was probably in the right part of the track, but I thought she was kind of always on top, and she strikes as one who's got more to come over 6 furlongs, and I don't know whether she's going to be good enough to even hit the frame in a race like this, but she's not one to rule out of calculations entirely, I don't think.
40-1 at the moment in places, so a bit of value for you there. Now, half an hour later or so, we've got another Aidan O'Brien hot pot here in Hermosa, fresh from doing the Guineas double. She's 5-4. Is she the worthy favourite?
Yeah, I think she's a potentially a real top notcher. 2 Guineas wins, really impressive both starts. Obviously sticking to a mile for now. She's going to be even better over a mile and a quarter, isn't she, in time? Certainly by the way she goes about her business and from a pedigree as well. So yeah, this is almost, it's just very straightforward, I think, isn't it? Maxab doesn't run. Yeah.
I kind of agree and disagree at the same time, if that's possible. I do think she's a very good filly. I think there've only been 3 other horses that have won both the Newmarket and Curragh Guineas, and 2 of them came on and won the Coronation comfortably. The one who didn't was Finscale Bio, and she'd already had she took in the French Guineas in between, so she'd had a busy early season, and she couldn't land this. And it does look like Hermosa is getting better by the run, doesn't it? I think if you go through, she had quite a busy time of it too, and she, even in the face of a very busy schedule, she was just about getting better with every single start, and that was a pretty devastating run in the Curragh. But I do think that it is quite an interesting race. Obviously, you've got the unknown quantity in Jubiloso, who is extremely well bred and has made a very deep impression in 2 runs. She's only won a maiden and a novice race, so it is a huge jump up. But she's looked potentially top notch in beating up lesser opposition, and the fact that Sir Michael Stout seems to be keen to let her take a chance in a race like this is interesting. He's not the sort of person who do that lightly. And I quite like Magnetic Charm at a bigger price, who won Listed Race at York on her reappearance, and she wasn't up to this sort of level as a 2-year-old, but she's from a family that have all got better with age. I think she's a half sister to Asherette, who won the Duke of Cambridge at this meeting and posted a figure higher than 120 in winning that race. And I suspect that Magnetic Charm might be able to get similar to that at some stage. I'm not saying it's going to be straight away, but I like the way she won at York. I thought she kept a little bit back for herself in a way, but in a good way. Not as in she hit the front and she was still sort of looking around a little bit, and I suspect she's going to be able to improve on what she's actually done so far, but she will have to. And we should of course mention Pretty Pollyanna as well, who was, I think, the Timeform top rated juvenile filly last year, and she obviously missed Newmarket and went straight to the Curragh, and I think she was beaten 4 lengths by Hermosa. On the face of it, it's hard to find a reason why she would reverse that, but similar to the St James's Palace scenario, it was her first run, and you could say she's going to improve for that. And if she can get back to the pick of her juvenile form, then she is going to prove a worthy rival for Hermosa at least. So she could be a player, but having said all that, I do come back to the fact that Hermosa could just be that bit special.
I suspect I was a bit dismissive, and you sort of scratching around a bit.
But
no, I know what you mean.
She did look very good when she won Ireland last time, didn't she?
Okay, so seemingly Hermosa's to lose on the Friday. Last day now. We'll start with the Hardwicke on the Saturday. We've mentioned that last year's winner Crystal Ocean's seemingly going to go to Prince of Wales on the Wednesday. So, I mean, this looks as wide open as some of the other races at the meeting.
It's very much a case of what runs, isn't it? You know, you potentially got Defoe and Kew Gardens, obviously coming from the Coronation, maybe even Lati Dar as well. You know, I think you can scratch her on, can't you? She just didn't handle the track at all for me. I think a potentially interesting one that I don't think we've necessarily seen the best of yet is Gareth. Obviously his career's been far from straightforward so far. He's had very little racing, really impressive on his reappearance in France. Bit underwhelming, I think it's probably fair to say, in the Gannet. I think going up in trip, he's bred to stay this sort of trip, and I do still think he's a potential Group 1 horse. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet. I don't know maybe whether that second run came a bit quick as well.
It's possible. The horse has seemingly had issues.
Definitely had his problems, hasn't he? And
wasn't it?
Like you said, Nick, it's very open. There's not really like a sort of outstanding one in this, and I think it's the sort of race where if Gareth can take that step forward, then he's potentially going to be the best of them. The ones that do set the standard are Defoe and Kew Gardens, but it's not insurmountable for the rest of them by any means.
It is hard to know who's going to run, isn't it? Because it's always a race where it attracts a very good entry. I mean, a lot of Group 1 horses, but at the end of the day, it is a Group 2. It is a Group 2 where Group 1 horses don't have to carry penalties, isn't it? Which makes it attractive for Group 1 horses. But at the end of the day, it is a Group 2, and we're kind of guessing who's going to run.
Yeah, I think we'll know more after Wednesday, won't we?
Or when we have the decks for the Prince of Wales.
Exactly, yeah. I think another one to mention that I noticed was quite tight in the betting was Mirage Dancer, who, I don't know, he's a horse who, for me, potentially hasn't quite delivered on everything he promised earlier in his career. The races that he's won are races where he's almost capitalised on a drop in grade or several underperforming, that sort of thing. And it might be the case again where if this turns out to be a relatively thin Group 2, he's the sort of horse that's going to give his running. But I think if one of those, Gareth or Kew Gardens Defoe turn up, then I thought Mirage Dancer was pretty skinny, to be honest, in the betting at the moment.
Okay, the last race we'll touch on in detail is Diamond Jubilee. Now, the favourite at the time of recording is Invincible Army, and his form coming from the Duke of York looks rock solid.
Yeah, it does. He's a horse who, I think we didn't see him for the second half of last year, and he's quite a big horse, isn't he? And he probably has taken a bit of time to really come to himself, and he does look to be on the fast lane to being a Group 1 sprinter this year, doesn't he? He has been impressive in both of his wins. He readily accounted for the field and the cabbage on his return at Doncaster, and like you say, he dealt with that field pretty comfortably at York. There was very little not to like about that, I think. And I think his trainer was originally expressing some concerns about very fast ground for him, but it seems like that's not going to be an issue now. It may well get quicker later in the week, but it's hard to see the ground being an excuse for him. And he's probably a worthy favourite. We're expecting Blue Point to run on Tuesday and unlikely to do the double, so that would leave Invincible Army top on our ratings. He doesn't have a lot in hand. He's a worthy favourite because he's a 4-year-old who's not fully exposed and is going the right way and has been impressive in his 2 rounds this year, but he doesn't have a lot in hand, and it's not like he's a rock solid favourite who has to underperform to lose. He probably actually still has to improve a little bit more himself to win a good Diamond Jubilee, doesn't he?
I have to admit, I started out almost looking for one to beat him a bit, And the problem I came up with, I didn't really find one.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that the Inns of Court and City Light, the two French horses, I thought you could pick sort of holes in their form. And then after that, you're looking at the Tin Man, Sansamali, who was disappointing at in Maiden and at Hamilton. And then after that, you
it's quite thin, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you talk about Invincible Army not having that much in hand on the face of it. If you almost rule out a few, he's then gapping them a little bit, isn't he? I do definitely take your point though that it's by no means home and hose for Invincible Army. But I do sort of feel like he's definitely the one to beat, isn't he?
Yeah, that End of Court is quite a strange one because he's been around for a while. Well, he's 5 now. He's been running over 7. He gets 7 well. He's only just beaten in the Foray last year, and yet he seems to be a quicker horse this year. He dropped to 5 last time and showed, I think, more speed than we thought he had, really.
Definitely, yeah. I remember watching that. I think being quite surprised by how well he travelled in that race as well. He's definitely, I don't know where that speed's come from, but he's definitely developed some, hasn't he? Yeah,
he may just be a slightly later developer, and it's quite possible that he could be nudging a high 120s rating at some stage, but I think I don't really have a strong view. It's kind of the gist of it. City Light was only just beaten in the race last year. He's got 2 runs, that and when he won the all-weather finals last year. Those 2 are very much standouts on his record, and he has been pretty flat otherwise.
Yep.
But on those 2 runs, he is a player as well, and he won a listed, or he was just beaten by Inns of Court in a listed race on his return. I think the 3rd horse that day, who ties in closely with them, came out and won a Group 3 next time. So it's possible that the French form is the form to go. It's hard to know, really.
Yep.
It's probably a race maybe to take some clues from earlier in the week. I don't know, basically. I don't have a strong view at the moment.
Okay, the clock is beating us, but I know you both have some handicap fancies. There's been a lot of interest in the comments about the Wokingham. Someone's mentioned Bacchus, watchable as well. Do you, either of you, at Spanish City as well, do either of you have a strong view on the Wokingham?
I didn't, so I'll defer to Rory.
Not at all. I think it's a race which is hard to have a strong view. This is when you look. It doesn't look like you mentioned Dreamfield last year. You often get the horse who looks to have a lot in hand. Although often, actually, you also get the horse who comes in for a lot of very late support, the likes of Laddie's Poker 2 and horses like that, who end up much shorter than they were, say, at the start of the week, and it all looks much more obvious afterwards, doesn't it? But I'm not sure there's necessarily a horse like that in this year's race.
I didn't think it was a standout. I thought it was probably a race where it'll almost go to one that's not necessarily that well handicapped, but just runs right up to form. And one of those races where I think I'll probably, like you said earlier, take some clues from earlier in the week and just kind of play it near the time, to be honest.
Okay.
One I will just mention is it's not a strong fancy at all, but there's a horse trained in France called Alba Power. He used to be trained by Hugo Palmer as a 2-year-old, and he has some okay form as a 2-year-old. I think he was in the frame in a couple of pattern races. He's gone to France and he's won impressively first time out for the last 2 seasons. Now, he didn't go on from it at all last year, but he'd been gelded before his reappearance this year when he won even more impressively. And I'm wondering whether the gelding operation might help him hold his form a bit better this time around. And he's basically been running in small field races in France, and this is going to be a completely different scenario. But I think he's running for a mark of 101, which on that last run you could make a case that he is on quite an attractive mark. And I think he's one to have a look at anyway. Alba Power, I think he's 33 to 1 everywhere. So
spot on. I just dug him out. 33's Alba Power for the Wokingham. I've just about squeezed 5 minutes for you, so I'll just open up. Are there anything at the moment? I know that we're very unclear picture that's standing out for you in the handicap races.
Well, so there's a couple of handicappers from the Mark Johnston yard that I quite fancy. I mean, Baghdad won at the meeting last year. He's probably going to run in the Duke of Edinburgh. I think a mark of 104 for him is still more than fair. I think he might even make up into a group stayer in time. Sir Priestley in King George V, a horse that I've been really positive about all year. Again, a mark of 94, more than fair for him, and I think he's just that sort of typical tough Mark Johnston horse that is going to absolutely relish this. And it's not a handicap, but it used to be a handicap. We're the Wolferton, it's a listed race now, and Adib, who is going to be top rated in that race on the Timeform card. He's had 2 goes at 10 furlongs, one at Lingfield, one at Chester. I don't think those tight tracks suit him at all. If it does come up soft, or good to soft, that'll suit him even more. But I think, well, 13, 14 months ago, he won a Group 2 at Sandown. He's unpenalised for that because of the structure for the race. 10, 12 to 1, around that sort of mark, I think massively underestimates him. So, yeah, the 2 Johnson horses in the handicaps, and to be honest, the one that I'm most sweet on is Adib in that Wolferton. Yeah,
could make up into a really good race. The Wolferton.
I think it could. Yeah, it like I said, the penalty structure, the way it works, it definitely favours some horses more than others, and I think trainers are almost exploiting that at the moment. And yeah, Adib, he's got plenty of really strong form. That Group 2 is, again, it reads really well. So unpenalised for that 10 to 1, I think is almost a steal for him. Yeah.
I'll just mention a few, only one in a handicap. I already mentioned Kingsfield and Albert Power, but one in the Sandringham. We don't have any entries for the Sandringham. There's no betting for the race either, so it makes it a little bit tricky. But one that I've had in mind for the race ever since she came out and won nicely on her reappearance at Goodwood is a horse called Desirous, trained by Rafe Beckett. She's out of a horse called Emulous, who was a Group 1 winner for Dermot Weld. I think she was rated 123 odd with Timeform. And Desirous, I like the way that she won that handicap debut at Goodwood. I thought it looked like a good race beforehand. There were several interesting fillies in there. It's actually the race that Persuasive won. And she went on to win the Sandringham and prove herself a Group 1 filly later in her career. And I like the way Desirous won that from off a pace which didn't seem very strong, and the way she got to the front was very likeable, and I suspect she's a horse who's got plenty more to offer. And a couple of 2-year-olds to mention quickly. One is a horse called Silent Wave. Now, Charlie Appleby has had a lot of he's had several fillies who have looked potentially very good and winning on debut in the last couple of months. This was one of them who I was quite taken by. She made a winning debut at Goodwood last month, and she's bred to be good. She's the first foal out of Secret Gesture, who was Group 1 place multiple times, and a Group 2 winner, and Group 1 place multiple times, including in the Oaks.
She was in the Oaks, yeah.
Yeah, and she's by Warfront, this filly, Silent Wave, and the bare form is not anything special, and I think the runner-up has been quite soundly beaten since, but I like the way that she was stretching away nicely later on. I think she's a horse who could well be suited by the Albany, and one who's, if he runs in the Chesham, is unlikely to be much of a prize, but I was very taken with a horse called Lope E. Fernandez, who made a winning debut. He's trained by Aidan O'Brien. He made a winning debut at the Curragh just a week ago, over 7 furlongs. He's by Lope de Vega, and he's a half-brother to a horse called Dark Vision, who won his first 3 last year as a 2-1 for Mark Johnson, including the Coventry Stakes. Yeah, and he just looked, everything about the way that he won that maiden at the Curragh looked like he was a potentially high-class prospect. So if they decide to run him in the Chesham, I think he could take quite a lot of beating.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt and Rory, for joining us. Hopefully you found that informative, and if you want more Royal Ascot content, with plenty going on microsite over the next few days, timeform.com/Royal-Ascot.